Hello, BookTube, and welcome to Weekly Reads. I've had a weird reading week. Well, I think a weird week in general. The early part of this reading week had me a bit down. Whether it's the books or just life in general, I don't know. But anyway, the second part of the week I bounced back. Like from Wednesday, I've had a bit of a bounce back. So anyway, let's get to the books. So coming off of my bail redemption of Still Crow Saga by Paul Krueger, and really changing my opinion of the novel. Yeah. Leaving aside Paul Krueger himself, I mean, the novel's really good. I was confident, I could do a bit more bill redemption. I was 2 for 1 at that point. So I decided to bill redeem TJ Klune's The House in the Cerulean Sea and bill redemption rejected. It's the story of Linus Baker, who works for this Department of Magical Children. They're basically like CPS who focus on magical children. And so Linus goes to various magical orphanages and inspects them. And he is eventually assigned to a hard case orphanage, or one that's kind of a bit rogue. So he goes, he meets the oddball children, and they're the head of the orphanage, and Linus and the head of the, and I think it's Arthur Parnassus, fall in love. And eventually, I'm assuming, crap happens. The villagers near where the orphanage is don't particularly like the kids, or the orphanage being there. And I'm assuming eventually Arthur and Linus just outright adopt these children themselves. Is my assumption. I read a bit ahead, but I still bailed. I made it a little further this time than I did last time, but not by much. And that was also skim reading. Because I was thinking, okay, maybe the book will actually be interesting once we get to the actual meat of the story and not all of this prep work. Didn't work. And I think if it weren't for the style, if it weren't for this sort of whimsical, fairy tale-y, middle grade style, I think I might have liked this book a lot. I mean, I might have actually liked it. I mean, I don't like it. So it's rather frustrating. I want to say this is Klune's first book for adults. So that could be part of the problem, is him being used to writing for a middle grade or even a YA audience, that his writing style is still geared towards that demographic. But anyway, so it was a disappointing read. So I followed up The House in the Cerulean Sea with a reread of a book I like, even though I do have some serious reservations, and that is Blackfish City by Sam J. Miller. Unfortunately for this reread, I started picking at the flaws of what ticked me off about my first reading of the book. The world building, particularly the cultural world building. The city of Connacht is still wonderfully realized, but culturally, it's pretty much 20 teens. and that's about 130 years out of date for this book. So this novel takes place in the 2140s on the floating oil rig city of Connacht. It's basically like a giant oil rig, although it seems to also float, that has become a refuge for people fleeing climatic devastation. And the city's sort of a libertarian utopia. And one day, a woman riding a killer whale with a bear with a face cage and cages on its paws arrive. And her arrival sends ripples of shock and interest and fear throughout the city. And so the novel follows 4 people, 3 of whom are revealed to be either the children, the son and daughter, and the grandchild of this woman, the woman who rides the killer whale, and the 4th person, the son of one of the wealthiest men in Connacht. And so the novel is really about this family who've been separated by circumstances and poor decision making, coming back together and really becoming a family again. And as I read the novel, I mean, a lot of the issues I had with it the first time I read it started to kind of, I think, come more to the fore. Obviously, there's the world building. The novel takes place in 2140. I seriously doubt a lot of what we would deal with today would be dealt with then. Namely, there's a scene where Sok, the grandchild of Masarak, the whale woman, is non-binary. And so they have a scene where they basically have to explain being non-binary to this woman and her just not getting it. And again, also with Phil, the not member of the family, the grandson of the super wealthy person. And that, it's like, okay, that, you could see that happening today. But 120 years from now? No. I mean, it's like, I seriously doubt it. And there are a lot of other issues very similar to that where you're like, yeah, I mean, it would be, I mean, Miller seems to be a little wedded to either contemporary or even earlier, because there's very much a lot of Phil's interactions with this one character, Ishmael, which are just come straight out of like classic gay literature from the 70s. Really, it kind of reads that way, or 80s. And then there are a lot of more like 2020 housing issues and stuff like that. 20 teens. So that kind of annoyed me. And then, of course, it also became pretty obvious on this reread that the character of Phil is meant to really just pass on information. That basically, once he did his purpose, which was to sort of sexually transmit via this sort of psychological AIDS XP to Sok, which would give Sok the necessary information for later in the book, that once that purpose is done, he could be gruesomely killed off. And that's what happened. So I kind of really got a bit frustrated with the book. So anyway, so that was disappointing, and I guess a regular theme, because I'll come back to this in a few, that maybe sometimes rereading's not the best idea for me, because sometimes it could be a rich, rewarding experience of re-entering a world that love and amazing, and sometimes you will start to pick it apart or wonder why I like this book in the first place. But anyway, all that said, I did bail on Blackfish City, and I'll come back to this in a bit. So next up on Monday, I had a struggle of whether or not I wanted to do another Belle Redemption or a reread. So either have another go at The Blue Angel, or reread Charming Billy. And I decided to reread Charming Billy, and then I didn't get too far. I was not in the mood. So I spent about an hour and a half, and then I just read some fairy tale. So on Monday, I read volumes 11 and 12 of fairy tale. This wrapped up the Tower of Heaven arc, or it was the middle and conclusion of the Tower of Heaven arc, in which the character Jalal tries to resurrect the Dark Wizard Zeref by sacrificing Ursa, and the fairy tale members of the Team Natsu, as well as Juvia, basically work their way through Jalal's various quirky mini-boss squads until Natsu eventually gets to Jalal and kicks his butt in a very spectacular way. But anyway, and then on Tuesday I read volumes 13 and 14 of Fairy Tale, and this starts the Fighting Festival arc, which sees the Guildmaster of Fairy Tale, Makarov's grandson Laxus, launch a coup, in which he and his sort of bodyguard team basically try to force Makarov to retire and pass on the title of Master of Fairy Tale to Laxus, who ends to basically purge the guild of those members who he either sees as weak or bringing the guild a bad name. And so over the course of these two arcs, Fairy Tale fights against itself, and eventually our main protagonists fight Laxus's team. Lucy beats Bixlow. Well, Ursa first beats Evergreen, and then Lucy with Loki beats Bixlow, which is awesome. And then Mary Jane beats Freed. So, and then volume 15 will be Natsu and Gajil, who's joined the Fairy Tale along with Juvia, will fight Laxus, which I haven't gotten to volume 15 yet. So 2 days of Fairy Tale, and I kind of, after I made some videos on Wednesday, I kind of started to feel a bit better. So I came back to Charming Billy, and this time I read it, and I finished it today, and I don't love it as well as I did the first time I read it in 2017. I don't know if that was circumstance. It was like a new discovery, and I'm a lot more enthusiastic about like the first time I read fiction compared to subsequent readings where I'm significantly more critical, but in this reading I was quite critical. I mean, it's a charming novel. It's about Billy Lynch, who, after World War II, he and his cousin Dennis are working on a summer home for Dennis's stepfather. And there they meet these two Irish nursemaids. And they sort of pair off. And eventually Billy is told that the girl he's in love with, Ava, has died. And so he later marries Maeve, and he becomes an alcoholic. And only decades later does he learn that the girl he was in love with, is only not dead. She's very much alive, and had actually stolen the money he'd sent her to come over back to America. And yeah, the novel just really didn't do it for me this time. And I also noticed that while most of the story is told by Dennis's daughter, as she is the I narrator, and it seems like she's telling this story to her husband at points, there are also points where it's in the third person, or either from Dennis's point of view or Billy's point of view, and it doesn't quite gel, I don't think, coming back to it. It's like, it didn't quite work for me, unfortunately. So anyway, while I'm not in the funk I was, or the doldrums as I was earlier this week, except for Fairy Tale, has been disappointing. So that leaves me with trying to figure out what I'm going to read this coming weekend. One option I had is to have another go at Blackfish City, and hopefully, whatever funk I was in last weekend, I can go through and maybe have a much better reading experience with. Or I could bail redeem The Lesser Bohemians by Eimear McBride. Or I could start on Mazes of Power by Juliette Wade, which I've been meaning to get to for a while. And if you want to know, Juliette Wade has a YouTube channel. It's called Talk to Your Universe, or Talk to You Universe, or something like that, where every week she does a live stream where she talks about world building with a regular crew of people she talks to about world building, which is often interesting. Although I haven't really watched any recent episodes. There's way too much more stuff to watch. And then I've also been thinking about maybe reading some history. Inglorious Empire by Shashi Tharoor, or November 1918 by Robert Gerwarth. So I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to read this weekend and coming week. I'll let you know on next weekly reads, or if I have any need to rant in any other videos I have during the coming week, which is possible. Because I could really let Blackfish City just wait and come back to it in maybe a year or two. Is always an option. We shall see. Anyway, BookTube. So I also want to a few other things before I sign off. So I think on Monday I will be putting up a new tag video, an original tag for me. So I think it was Wednesday's video when I did my writing and art update. Two commenters, David and Deborah, both recommended tag ideas. David mentioned a writing tag and an art tag, and Deborah mentioned organizing a tag around Agatha Christie. And I kind of like those ideas, so I think I'm going to do that. So on Monday, I'll have a writing tag up. I've already got some of the questions that I want to ask. I want to organize them and maybe rethink some of them, and also come up with an interesting name. The art tag, I'm not entirely sure how to do that one. I don't know if I should do like basically like a do you like to do art, that sort of thing, or sort of try to tie the questions into like book answers. So say for example, your favorite cover of a book, and the answer would be like, say, The House in the Cerulean Sea, or something like that. Or so I need to think more about that one. And then with the Agatha Christie one, I was thinking of doing it with like Miss Marple. Like basically the questions would sort of draw inspiration from the 12 Miss Marple novels. But I don't know if I should do them as sort of like personal questions, or again, questions that could lead to a book title answer. So say, for example, I'm blanking on an example, but it would be like, the answer would be either like a question from like a personal question, like a Q&A style, or a sort of like a book title answer. So I'm not entirely sure. So if you have any thoughts on that, whether it should be personal or bookish, let me know down in the comments. And as I work on that tag, I'll take feedback into consideration. What else is there? So next week will be a continuation of the library tour. Obviously, we will be starting the history shelf, and that should take all week. And then I'll move on to for the last weeks of the year, it'll be science fiction and fantasy. And then I'll try to do some tags if I find any interesting ones. And of course, there will be next week's weekly reads. So until then, BookTube, thank you. Have a great afternoon. Or, well, technically by this point it should be evening. So have a great evening and stay safe. Thank you, BookTube, and see you next week.